Welcome to the UPoker Academy Poker Lecture Series designed to make you a better poker player. This is Lesson 2, Shorthanded versus Full Ring. Now what do we mean when we say shorthanded and full ring? Well, these are two poker jargon terms meant to indicate the number of players sitting at the table with you. If you'll see here, we have 8 players at the table. This is considered a full ring game. When you have 8, 9, or 10 players, it is full-handed. And when you have 6 or less players, it is considered short-handed. And there is a special kind of short-handed game called heads up, which is when it's just you and another player. And if you think of heads up to full ring on a spectrum of play styles, essentially you're going to get more aggressive the shorter the game gets, and you're going to be betting more the shorter the game gets and playing more hands. And so heads up is essentially just a short-handed game taken to its extreme. But right now we're playing full ring. So we're going to talk about full ring poker strategy. So in full ring poker, you basically divide the table up into 3 sectors. You have the blinds, then you have early position, and you have late position. And these are meant to indicate your position on the table relative to the buttons. So right now we're in the blinds, we're in the big blind. So as you move closer to the button, your strategy changes. And we're going to talk about position in another lecture, but be aware that in full ring, you have several more people in each position than you do in shorthanded or heads up. And what that means is that you have more players you have to beat by the river. So for your hand selection, this means your hand selection needs to be tighter. In full ring, you need to play fewer hands because there are so many other hands out there. You do need to make very strong hands when you do get it all in. Hands like top pair are generally okay to play, depending on your stack size, which we talked about in the first lecture. But hands like middle pair and bottom pair are usually going to be behind, simply because somebody out there is going to have a top pair. And while this may not be the case in shorthanded and heads-up poker, it is definitely the case in full ring. So the first rule of full ring is you play strong hands. As you begin to realize that not everybody plays full ring correctly, you're going to realize that a lot of people play too many hands. This leads us to the second rule. You play tight in full ring. You want to play, to get strong hands, you want to play hands that are, that have 2 high cards, particularly an ace with a very good kicker, like an ace-jack, ace-queen, or ace-king, or a king-queen. But you want to avoid hands that have a weak kicker. So a hand like ace-8, even though it is an ace, in full ring it's not a strong hand. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They play hands like ace-7, ace-6, and then what happens? They get it up against somebody with ace-jack, and they lose all their money. So if somebody was putting me to a decision heads up for all my chips, and I had ace-jack and I had top pair, I would be happy to go up against them, and I would most likely call, of course depending on my stack size. However, if I have ace-jack in a full ring game and somebody re-raises me, I'm considering folding. Even though I've got top pair with a jack kicker, the likelihood of them having ace-queen or ace-king or a set is much, much higher because there are more people in the pot. So that's the second rule of full ring play, which is play tight. The first rule, if you remember, was play strong hands. And the difference is when we say play strong hands, we're talking about after the flop. You want to play hands that make good hands, so your top pairs. And before the flop, in order to make rule 1 happen, you want to play tightly. The third rule of full ring is to always raise. If you're going to play a hand, it's going to be a hand that's worth a raise. So here you see several players limping in. This is a mistake. You want to raise in full ring because you want to limit the number of players in the pot. And by raising, you can convince several players to fold who otherwise would have called. This is good for us. We want to play with as few people in the pot as possible because this really opens our options with regard to pot sizing as well as c-bets and bluffs. And a c-bet is a continuation bet. It's a bet made to continue your aggression. So I raise before the flop and then I bet the flop. That's a c-bet because I'm continuation betting. So rule 3 is to always raise. Rule 4, and I've just kind of made these rules up as I go along. Rule 4 is to allow your opponents to catch second best hands and then don't push them off those hands. So what does this mean? If we have a hand like Ace King, we want to raise, and we want to raise significantly, something like 4 times the big blind, because this allows our opponents to call with weaker aces and catch second best hands. Hands like Ace 9 would call, they would flop the ace along with us, and they would lose their entire stack. And this is exactly the kind of behavior we want to encourage. So how do we put this all into practice? Well, usually you start with a starting hand chart, and there is one available on Risk-Oriented under the Tools section. But the starting hand chart only tells you part of the picture. What's more important is the stack to pot ratio we talked about in the first lecture, the stack sizes lecture. And we want to always keep in mind your stack to pot ratio in full ring. But essentially it's just going to be a feel game. If you feel like you're in a good position and you've got a good hand, and you believe that a raise is appropriate, then you can generally play the hand. Now let's talk about how that changes for shorthanded poker, because this is a lecture that's supposed to cover shorthanded as well as full ring. As you get shorter, say 5-handed, you become much more affected by the blinds, and you need to make more raises, and you need to play more aggressively in order to take the blinds, because there are fewer people in the pot. The likelihood is that nobody's got you beat just yet, and the likelihood is nobody's got a very, very strong hand that they might want to play against you. So we are going to raise more frequently 5-handed, which we are now for the time being. It looks like a couple of players might sit back in. But you still want to limit your raises to when you feel confident that raising is the right play. So when you're on the button and you've got a decent hand, you still don't want to raise with hands like Jack 4, because stealing the blinds is not as valuable as building a pot and taking it down with a great hand. Other things to note about short stack poker. Typically short stack is played for more chips. It's usually deeper stacked. Shorthanded poker is normally deeper stacked, which means the hands you play are going to be things like suited connectors. However, if you are playing in a shorthanded game that is short stacked, you have a very interesting conundrum, because you may actually be able to raise with much weaker hands because the stacks are so much shorter. You were playing 4-handed, and we've got Ace 10 in the big blind, and we are going to make a sizable raise with this hand, because the chances are nobody's got a great hand, and because we're playing just 30 big blinds deep, we're going to be confident that if we do catch the ace or the 10, that we are going to get our chips in. This allows us to play hands for raises and even re-raises that we might have folded in full ring poker or deep stack poker. A great example of this would be if we had something like 9-10 suited on the button and middle position re-raises us. If we've got 30 big blinds, we almost always want to go all in there, because once we've re-raised, they have the option to fold and we pick up the blinds and their raise. And because we're short-handed, they're most likely raising with weaker hands, so they're more likely to fold. So you see how this all kind of comes together? I hope so. So thank you for joining us at UPoker Academy for Lesson 2, Shorthanded versus Full Ring. Please check us out on riskoriented.com for more poker strategy delivered directly to your YouTube account. Please like us and subscribe to us. And for more poker strategy right now, continue on to our next poker lecture by clicking here right in this box. And enjoy watching the rest of this hand play out.